Welcome to this walkthrough of the E1A and E1B inputs into the B3 guidelines tracking tool. My name is Pat Smith. I'm a senior research fellow at the CSBR at the University of Minnesota, and I am one of the program administrators for B3 and SB 2030. Uh, I'll start by just noting that the tracking tool, the B3 guidelines tracking tool, which tracks the progress of projects going through B3 guidelines, is sorted into these individual guidelines. The one we're going to be looking at today is E1A and E1B. These are combined. They used to be two guidelines. They are now one. And this is the interface that we'll be looking at here. I'm going to you'd click here, and then I will just pull over what that looks like. Okay, so I'm just going to run through this essentially from the top to the bottom. Starting up here, we have the square footage of the project. I will note that that is not input under this guideline. It's actually input under guideline P0D. So if this is incorrect, it'll need to be changed at guideline P0D. Second line here is an administrator change or an administrator input, and that is which method are you using to create your energy target. And that is for almost all projects going to be the energy standard tool. If you've been working with us and there needs to be some additional load added, or if there is some process load that maybe needs to be considered, that this may be a custom input that you would work with us to do. But for most projects, you're just going to be using the EST that will set your target. Next button down here is launching the energy standard tool. I'm going to skip over that for just a second and look at this 90% or look at this SB 2030 reduction requirement. If this is incorrect, if you believe that you should be at 80% better project, for example, you need to let us know because this is also an administrator change. We believe we have all these correct in the system, but if this is wrong, we would need to validate it and then adjust those. All right, now getting back to the energy standard tool, this button launches that energy standard tool. If you click on that, that would take you to the energy standard tool, which would start you here with the space asset areas inputs. I'm just going to make a couple of notes on the EST because a full run through of using this tool is outside of what this video is intended for. I just want to make a note that you want to have your detailed inputs enabled so that you have access to some of the more specific levers for these different space asset areas. And then I'll also note that under this rating tab, once you've done the work to establish your building, you would then want that to report back the targets to the tracking tool. To do that, you'd want to calculate, save, and return. And if they're not returning, I would let it calculate for longer and then trying it again. That's often what happens when you don't see those returning to the tracking tool. The other note to make in this tool is that if you are modeling your building in this tool, if you're using this as what we call your as design model, those outputs will not automatically flow back into the tracking tool currently. We're likely to have that functionality in the future, but right now you'll need to type those over manually. So if you want to get the outputs of this tool, you would actually look at visualizations. You would select your chart type. In this case, I'm looking at electric consumption, and then you have those monthly values here that you'd have to type back into the other part of the interface. Again, we're planning on automating this, but currently those do not flow in automatically. Okay, so you would have again gone here. Let's close out of that. You would have calculated, you would have saved, and you would have returned after inputting your building's attributes correctly. Or if you're using another model to for your ads design, you'd be inputting just the programmatic elements essentially of the building into that tool. So I'm going to close out of that, and those should show up here in the SB 2030 energy standard and the carbon standard. So we have two standards under SB 2030. The energy one is most often the one that folks run into first, but just noting that we do hold two standards under the program. All right. I will also note here that there is a analysis manager that's shown here, and that gives you the option um, to clone different models, to test out maybe different strategies. Then you can also assign them to different phases. So in this case, we have the phase FD model. Here is active, and it is assigned to the FD phase. So if you're moving from D phase to FD phase, you need to clone the model, adjust the model, update the model, and then assign it to that phase. Older versions of this tool interface will not have the ability to have that analysis manager. You just have one analysis locked to each of the phases, but that's at this point a pretty most projects that are going through right now will have access to this analysis manager. All right. So again, once you've seen this run, you should have these values here. So the next area of the interface is going to be your energy use. And I'm just going to scroll down here to show that. And so this would be inputting those outputs of your energy model. Again, you can bring in a model like an ISVE model or a trace model. Um, it may come from that, and it may come from the embedded energy standard tools as design functionality. But they need to be input in here or updated in here when you have those. Please confirm that your units match. We want to make sure that those are correct. And then at the right here, it shows um, your total and your total CO2. One thing to note in here is that this should not include any offsets from renewables. So basically turn off your renewables before you run your model, before you produce these outputs, because this is the energy demand for the project. We want to input the on-site renewable generation at the next section. So this next section is on-site renewable generation. You've got a couple of options here. We're seeing mostly photovoltaic if folks are going this direction, and then what the monthly outputs for that are. This does support annual outputs if that's what you have. We do ask for consumption values to be in monthly, but we do let the renewables come in as an annualized value. One enormous note to make here is that you cannot input renewable generation that has the renewable energy certificates um, either assigned or obligated to other projects. If that's the case, that essentially does not count towards meeting SB 2030 because it's meeting some other obligation. We can't have those double counted. All right, the next section here is the on-site target area, and so the on-site target is in play if a project team says, oh, I can't quite make 90% better or 80% better using cost-effective energy efficiency strategies. The team would need to show that the all cost-effective energy conservation measures achieve an EUI, energy use intensity, that is greater than our target. And if they can show that, that um, EUI value that can be achieved by all cost-effective measures becomes the on-site target. And so the team needs to propose this, and then we, as the review team, validate that proposed number or modify it if needed. And that essentially becomes a negotiated on-site target, and that needs to be met with measures on the project site. The cost effectiveness, what we consider to be cost effectiveness, does shift with different versions of the program. It's a little bit more than we're going to cover in this video today, but just be very careful that you're referencing the appropriate cost effective measure life and payback numbers, because when we went to 2025, those shifted considerably. So we as a review team essentially validate the proposed on-site target and again adjust if needed. So here we have, I input here what would be a final on-site input set or an on-site target. So that would be a thing that we would input as the review team. And that becomes part of the on-site versus off-site path to meeting SB 2030. So if you do need to set an on-site target, we do need to we as a review group do need to meet with the project team to confirm that you're looking at all cost-effective potential measures for the project. So again, the input you'll see here is the project team's proposal, and then we as the as the admins would come in and provide a validated number. All right, the next section here is off-site renewable energy. So this is everything from in portfolio renewable energy generation to market products. I'll note here that if you are working on a 90% better project and you're using unbundled RECs as part of your solution to meeting SB 2030, there is now a procurement factor applied under that generation of the program, and that is a procurement factor of 0.2, meaning that you need to buy 5 times as many than you would under prior versions of the program. Right? They count 20% of their value counts towards meeting SB 2030. Similar here, do not input any renewable energy generation where you have the renewable energy certificates, the RECs, either sold or otherwise obligated to another project. Shown below here is now our offsite total energy, so how much does this deduct, and then where you're getting with your net energy, both on-site and off-site, towards hitting your 2030 target. So if you see here, this is 10.76, and that squeaks in under our 2030 target of 10.8 by doing a mixture of efficiency measures here, some on-site renewable generation, and some off-site renewable energy generation, in this case an in-portfolio renewable system. Shown below here is our graph of these indicators, what we call the waterfall diagram, where you have the 2030 baseline, 2003 baseline, code efficiency and efficiency improvements above code. This gets to your gross energy use, your on-site renewables. This little dotted line here is your final on-site target. On-site energy needs to be below that. Then you've got off-site measures coming into play, and then net energy shown here, again coming in right under that target. If you've made any changes, you'll need to check for compliance for this graph to actually update. The last section I'll show is design documents, and this is unsurprisingly the design documents for the project and the simulation documents for the project. So at earlier phases, much of this is grayed out, but here we are at the final design phase. We need all of this information to be input. We've got a max file size currently of 256 megabyte. So just be cautious with that as you're putting together your information. The last section here is simulation documentation. This is energy model documentation that's coming in from outside tools, and then a selection of which software, and then if you're using a prescriptive method for a small building, which one of those are you going forward with? And we have slots here for additional simulation information. Once you're complete, you can check for compliance. This will come back as not compliant because I don't have my simulation documentation or my design documentation in here, but you would check for that here, and then even if you're not complete, you can still save and close if you need to come back and work on this later. So I can save and close this to work on it later. All right, that concludes our brief run through. As always, any questions can come to us at guidelines@b3mn.org, and thanks for your time today.